Is this someone from our, who's the Dujin meat geek note taker? That's from our place? Tanvi?
No, ma'am, I'm just disconnecting because it's not from our place.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, ma'am. This is Kiran.
Hi, Kiran.
Yeah,
Okay.
just joined. Yeah.
Okay, great. So are you taking these notes or?
Sorry.
No. Who's this Dujin meat geek? Note taker. Okay, we can start in the next minute, Tanvi.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Myself, Tanvi Shinde. I'm part of the team at the Center for Family Business and Entrepreneurship at SPJIMR. It's good to see you all connected. And it's an absolute pleasure for me to welcome you all to today's session. This is the 8th edition of our research presentation series. SPJIMR, established in 1981 in Mumbai. It is top-ranked management institute. It is recognized as India's #1 business school by the Financial Times Global Rankings. Ranked among top 5 by Business Today, and ranked as level 5 pioneering school by the Positive Impact Rating for its societal impact and sustainability achievements. The Center for Family Business and Entrepreneurship empowers leaders with the skills, networks, and global perspectives needed for sustainable growth while upholding the strong family values. The center's programs support next generation leaders, women in business, families, aspiring entrepreneurs, and fresh graduates in developing an entrepreneurial mindset. As part of its commitment to advancing research, CFBE has been proudly hosting the Family Business and Entrepreneurship Research Presentation Series, which fosters insightful discussions on evolving landscapes of family enterprises and entrepreneurship. In this session, we are honored to welcome Dr. Allan Discua Cruz, Associate Professor, Senior Lecturer in Entrepreneurship, Director at Center for Family Business at Lancaster University Management School in UK. Dr. Allan's research focuses on entrepreneurship within family businesses and has been featured in prestigious journals including Academy of Management Perspectives, Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, Entrepreneurship and Regional Development, Journal of Business Ethics, European Management Review, and the International Small Business Journal. He currently serves as Associate Editor for Entrepreneurship and Regional Development and the European Journal of Family Businesses. He has recently co-edited the Elgar Encyclopedia of Family Business and the Palgrave Handbook of Managing Family Business Groups. Dr. Allan also serves as a special issue editor on the topics such as internationalization, poverty, religious entrepreneurship, and disabilities. His current research topics explore sustainability, family teams, values in family enterprises, and etc. We look forward to everyone's participation in this engaging and insightful discussion ahead. Over to you, Dr. Allan.
Thank you very much, Tammy, for that kind introduction. And thank you, everybody, for attending the presentation today. So I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully we'll have, let's see if I can do this well. And to share this, and I think hopefully you should be able to see that. Please let me know if you can see the screen, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. All right. So welcome very much into this presentation. And today I'm going to talk to you about the topic of religion and family business. And I'm really glad to be invited. I'm very honored to be invited by the SPJIMR Institute of Management and Research at Mumbai. The invitation, when I was contacted, I was thinking, you know, what is the best topic that I could actually share with the different members? And I thought, well, there is a topic that we have been researching lately, and we have been winning some awards on it. And it's all about how do we understand better that relationship between religion and family business. So let me start, and let me see if we can go to this. All right. So first of all, let me just tell you a little bit about our center. Our center since 2023 that entered the rankings of family business research centers have received, you know, the top ranking, or the top 10 ranks around the world, and we continue to be in that list. And we're extremely proud of that connection because it shows as well our good, you know, relationships that we have with other centers, but at the same time, the kind of work that we're doing in the family business realm. And last year we celebrated our 15-year anniversary, and we were given a nice birthday gift by Small Business Economics, which released an article about the latest family business research for the last, I think, 10 years, and where Lancaster appears as the #1 research center concentration in the world. So we're extremely, really happy about that. And one of the key themes that we concentrate recently is the aspect of religion. And so before we start with that, I'm going to tell a little bit about me and why am I here. My emphasis, as Tanvi mentioned, is on the aspect of entrepreneurship and teams and different topics. I became a center director a couple of years ago. But also, besides being an academic, I am also a family business member. I currently belong to the 4th generation of my family in business, and we started out in farming. And one of the key aspects that really attracted me to this topic was that relationship that I always experienced when I was with my family, you know, engaged in the farm and doing different things in farming. One of the tasks that I was engaged with is to deliver, you know, new ideas for the business. And one of those ideas was, well, how about we introduce something new? And the thing that I introduced in my family farm was citrus. So I started to plant a lot of trees, and lemon trees. Those are my favorite. And so what came after that is that last year we had our biggest production ever. I was really glad about that because I planted these orchards for almost 10 years ago. And actually what that came out of was an idea discussed with my dad. What was interesting on this is that I apply some of the things as a family we do when we are engaged in business. And for me, it was something very unique and very simple. In farming, a lot of farming families do the following. They begin to sow, you know, prepare the lands. They try to provide all the nutrients it has, water, exposure to the sun, and so on. But a lot of the times when you find that some families, they engage in that connection with something they cannot control. And that's why, for example, I found this really nice jar in one of my visits to a family business. And I took a picture of it because it reminded me of that little phrase that connects everything that we have control of to what happens after that and a harvest. For some families, it's something very important, something that connects them with something that they cannot control, but they feel is very much engaged into how their business will move on. Why is that important? Because a lot of the people that research family firms and concentrate on the aspects of crisis and how the family business survives so the different, you know, disturbances of issues or shocks. And sometimes you find that a lot of these families go about doing the business or doing what they do, and they concentrate very much on trying to bring their values and beliefs into those kind of decisions or those kind of issues or those kind of events. And very interestingly is that you find more and more that a lot of families also rely on the aspect of religion to determine the criteria for succession. This happens around the world. Again, these are some families that actually do that. And what you tend to see as well is that when we study family firms and the life cycles that they engage into, whether it's ownership, whether it's management, whether it's the family, there is always an element of connection between the way the family does things, and many families do that, and the way that they feel they have a connection to something beyond themselves. So, while I'm talking about religion, why is it interesting that we talk about religion, especially when we are doing research in family firms? Well, let me just start with an agenda. We're going to be talking about religion, family firms. I'm going to just suggest some recent findings or recent studies and some opportunities perhaps for your research that you might be interested in. First and foremost, let me just go a little bit into the topic of family business and religion. This is a picture I took in one of the recent conferences that we attended in Cyprus. A nice, portrayal, illustrative, artistic portrayal. And when the person was explaining this, the person said, well, for my lineage, people have believed there is something that is unique, the divine that is involved in our daily lives and the activities that we do. And a lot of the people that were engaged in businesses in that time have been family firms that still survive today. And for many of them, that relationship with the divine continues to be extremely important. And I thought that was very interesting because, again, it suggests there is a connection, a very intricate connection between the way families operate, the way that they go about doing business every day, and what they feel that relationship is with something that is beyond themselves. Does religion matter for families in business? They do. We recently edited the Allan Encyclopedia of Family Business, and one of the author teams, Lawson and Smith, they concentrate on the aspect of religion. They have been working a lot on the topic of religion, and they suggested if we take a closer look at how religion is studied in family firms, you're going to find that actually it has far more of an influence than we previously believed. And they provide some very good starting conversations as to how researchers can go about the topic of religion and how actually they can research a little bit more on this topic. So if you're interested in something like that, I will advise you to follow on, on this encyclopedia. And if there is any message from me today, is that religion does matter for family and business. So let's see if we can get a little bit closer into that. So religion, what is religion? Religion has so many definitions, and I am not here to suggest there is one definition that you should use. If you take a look at the encyclopedia, it'll tell you that there are many ways to actually conceptualize religion. A very broad definition that has been used extensively suggests that it is a system of meaning embodied in a personal life, a community, right, of faith, and a very, very clear worldview of how the world should be interpreted. And most of the time, this is done to something that is sacred for people. In family businesses, right, we blend this with the definition of family business, where family members own enough equity of a company to be able to really influence the strategy over time of a business and not involved in those top management positions. What you begin to see is that connection between systems of meaning might begin to have an influence into how they look about new business ways of doing things, how they go about starting new firms, how they go about and do business dealings every day. What is interesting in the type of understanding of religion is that religion has been a pervasive aspect of human life. This is not something new. It has been done and has been engaged for 4 generations. And of course, one of the most important things about this is that we have to acknowledge that it's a very rich and complex phenomenon. It's not something that can be very easily simplified. It exists in a variety of forms, and there are different religions and different ways in which people relate and have a relationship with what they believe is sacred. It involves doctrines, it involves stories, it becomes the way that we perceive the good from the bad, it becomes rituals, it becomes social institutions, you name it. And these elements, so these dimensions of religions will influence the way that people experience the world. And at the same time, it will influence the way that they go about in business. However, the issue is that for many years, religion has been seen as a taboo subject, right? And sometimes it meant that they didn't have the room to actually be talked about. And now, because we are really taking a closer look as to how family firms operate, we begin to see that a lot of families are relying or are very much influenced by that religion that they want to follow, and that influence continues over generations. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. And why is that important? Well, it is important because religion, if we take any definition, and it offers some concepts by which people will interpret themselves, and families go about this. And what happens is that what you tend to see when you appreciate the influence that religion can have. So you'll see that it's not incompatible with the business world. In the past, this used to be the key element, that it used to be a separation between religion and business. But actually, our recent studies suggest that we shouldn't overlook that connection. And why is that important? Because there are more calls to do more research of the role of religion in family firms. However, there are still only a handful of studies and very small, special issues that actually deal with how families really engage in that relationship with what they believe and how it influences their firm. Therefore, why is it important that we talk about this? Because the relevance of it has been noted as increasing. And so we have an opportunity, if you're in a context that you feel religion is extremely important for the way families do business, you have an opportunity to tell their story, to tell the phenomenon, and why is it unique and important. Some previous research that we have been conducting now suggests that we cannot suggest this is the way religion will influence. No. Religion will have a spectrum of influences, sometimes ranging from one in which families suggest religion has nothing to do with us, don't even talk about it, to gradually suggest that sometimes the way the families look at their faith and integrate it in the firm goes sometimes from having that period of doubt and tension. Should we introduce it? Should we use it? Should we rely on it as a family business? To moving towards religion is extremely important for us. And we integrate it and we exercise it and we do what our faith suggests in the way that we do business. So you have even those, kind of conceptual elements when you're studying religion. You have families at one spectrum will have nothing to do with it. Say, we have nothing to do with that, to the ones that actually is extremely important. So it is, when you are doing any study on family firms, and some families mention that they're, are influenced by religion, sometimes it's important to examine really the type of integration or influence that it has. I just want to talk really briefly about recent findings that we have been, covering based on our studies. And if you have any questions, please just let me know. All right, the first one. There is always that assumption that religion might not have any influence on the way family firms operate over time. But actually, the question for us was theoretically, what is it that these faith-led or religious-based practices do? And how do they affect the ways families firms operate over time? And this was a special issue that was edited by Joe Astrakhan and colleagues, in which they suggested that many of the key decision makers in family firms have a very strong religious-based set of values. And therefore, because they have these values influenced by their faith, they will somehow end up applying them consistently in the business. So we decided to take on that and said, well, how do we study this? And what we did is that we went about and tried to understand it from a very simplistic way. Said, all right, so the family business is a system, right? We have a system, so a business system and a family system. And when they come together, there must be something going on in there when you think about the influence of religion. And so based on system theory, we went about and tried to understand a little bit more families that actually do that. And to do that, our method was relying on autobiographies, in which these families suggested how faith influenced their management, the way the ownership was understood, the way the family was involved, or the way the business will operate over time. And these were firms that are, again, international firms that at the same time extremely, extremely successful. And so we wanted to understand what actually happened. What we actually found is that when we begin to understand the systems within the family business, we actually saw, based on those autobiographies, that the founders suggested we started out as individuals. And of course, you have the different systems going around the firms and so on that are very common to all of us as students of family firms. But what was interesting is that when they suggested, when we started to adopt some of the practices that are influenced by faith, what we began to see is that those systems begin to change because we were in a relationship with, the key actor or the key influence of our faith. Why was that important? Because what we began to see here is that, very simply, the finding for us that is that for these families that actually do that, they do that in a relationship. They do that actions in terms of a relationship that they develop over time without dating. And in that relationship comes the aspect of trust, which is one of the most important elements when we are understanding family firms. So for them, changing those systems within the firm started out simply by suggesting we are bringing in our relationship with our faith into the way we do business. Other study we did was related, well, some families might have tensions on this. Some families might have a struggle trying to introduce religion. And we actually started out the discussion with this in terms of there must be some dilemmas because some family members might agree with it, some family members might not agree with it. If they are operating in a market that actually has no clue about what religion does, or they have absolutely no influence on it, we suggested, well, let's take a closer look at families that engage, in international initiatives, and do they have any influence in terms of faith? What we found is that we started to understand firms that are engaged in international initiatives such as CSR. And so some countries, CSR is part of the way the business landscape operates. For others, it's more a voluntary approach. So we started to look into firms that actually have received awards for the CSR engagement. And when we were studying that, one of the key elements that they suggested is that they do it because they were very much influenced by their faith. I said, oh, this is interesting. What do you mean? Well, what we found out is that a lot of the aspects that they brought about in terms of how they integrate their religion in international initiatives had to match the way that they perceive their faith influence them to act in society. And so why was that important? Well, in that International Small Business Journal article, what we found is that when they were trying to integrate CSR, you begin to see that there's a lot of tensions because people have different perception of what CSR is all about. And when we looked into the emergence, the antecedents of those tensions, we found that religious beliefs was one of them. So, all right, so we went about and talked to family members, and we talked to non-family members. And for family members, he said, well, we are extremely religious. And one of the key things that our religious faith suggests is that we should not brag or shout about what we do. And therefore, we don't like to implement CSR. I said, wow, this is fascinating. But you won an award in CSR. How did this happen? And then, well, you have to ask our employees. Okay, we went about and asked the employees in the interviews. And they say, well, we are not religious, but we admire the way that the family has been involved so much in the community over time that we wanted to make something to honor them and their faith. And so what we saw was an employee, non-family member initiative led, inspired by the way the family acted in society based on their faith. So originally it was not part of the business, but because the employees were so thankful and so glad to be working for this company that they said to them, strategically, we could implement CSR and we want to be inspired by your faith. And so what we began to see here is that some of these dilemmas, sometimes that are started because of the beliefs that people have, actually have a very strong influence as to how the firm interacts with society. And what's interesting for us is that we believe that this quality of relationships between the family members and the non-family members in the way that they share their faith has a big influence into how these initiatives can be adopted. Then we were going to think, okay, well, this is one firm. How about different firms? And we began to think, okay, well, there must be something that we can say about the environment that these firms work into, and how do they are important or relevant, or how do they actually influence, their context or their communities and things like that. And so we consider a lens, probably most of you are familiar with, which is institutional logics. And institutional logics, it says there are different institutional logics, or the way that we understand how things work. Family, community, religion, markets, professions, so on and so on. They said, okay, fine, let's try to appreciate the way that religion might have an influence, not only in one firm, but perhaps in the way the whole context in which they operate works. And so with colleagues in the US, we began to see a little bit more concentrated on how in one particular community, people were actually guided by how the context viewed business should be made, business should be conducted. And what we actually found is that when we take a closer look at the community itself, what we actually see is that the influence of religion sometimes is very silent. but nevertheless extremely powerful. And why? Because people in those communities might be expecting businesses to behave a certain way because of the faith that most of the people in that community share. And when they do, it is easier for them to connect to the way the community will respond to any offers they make, to any business proposals they introduce, to the way family members actually operate over time. And what we found was very interesting, because what we saw was that these kind of faith-related mechanisms help to bring and to build a community. And they were highlighted by the way the business and the family operated. So it was very, very much a light, eye-opening moment for us, because we thought, sometimes we concentrate too much on the firm, but until we see whether it's an impact on the community or the community has an impact on the firm, we cannot really appreciate the aspect or the importance of religion. And so we found that out in that particular community. And again, we provide guidance as to if any other team of researchers wants to do research in this type of approach in another community with another religion, it allows you to do that. So we began to think, okay, fine, we understand the community, we understand the people. What happens internationally? What happens when they have to consider about, what else can we do, or how does the religion influence the way that we do business? And this was a very interesting project that we got involved in to link to SDGs. Of course, you know what SDGs are. You know that people are very much enthusiastic about how do we actually integrate them in the way the business operates, so on and so on. It provides a very nice framework for you to study, how different firms react to it and how the people engage in it. And so we did a study with colleagues that are in Vietnam. And for me, it was a fascinating approach because, again, it allowed me to understand and appreciate, the way the Buddhist way of understanding, the world. And so I never heard about it before. And so it was very enlightening to see how, when you bring this kind of perspective into the family firms, how does it affect the way the business actually operates? And what was interesting here is that we looked at family firms and non-family firms that actually were religious and non-religious. So we're now comparing, what happens when you compare the ones that are religious with the non-religious? And our question was, do they adopt specific SDGs, whether they are religious or non-religious? What do you think? Saying, we're thinking, maybe. I have no idea. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But the most important thing here is that there will be perhaps some type of influence. So what we found is actually that when family firms were influenced by religion, what you tend to see is the engagement or the interest into those SDGs that allowed them to shape a very long-term engagement, because they wanted to have that really strong influence over time from their values or religious values in the way the SDGs were chosen. Very differently, in a way, from the way that we're non-religious, which were more about short-term, yes, it's something we do, we can incorporate it here, but we saw a little bit more of a purpose in the way that SDGs were actually adopted if there was a family business that was religious behind it. And it was, again, a fascinating story to be involved in. And again, instructions as to if you wanted to do that, you can find it on that article. The most recent one we have is, sorry if I've taken too much of your time, it's about legacy. How can we appreciate the importance of religion in terms of legacy? Does it have any influence at all? Because many families want to leave something behind to the next generation. And sometimes it's not just the assets. Great, we have assets, buildings, bank accounts, money, and all these different bits. But for many families, it also involves transmitting down and passing down values and beliefs and the way that it influences your business. So we are not only seeing that connection now with the individual, with the business, with the community, with international initiatives, but what happens when you think about long-term? How is it that it's influencing a legacy of family business? And in this particular study, we consider cultural entrepreneurship. We emphasize the way that families create firms and whether religion has any influence on that. And what we found is, this is a paper that was recently published, it's still in press, but I think you can download it. It's about the legacy of faith when families engage in business. And there was a fascinating story for us because we went back and think, okay, why does it matter? If you take a look at many fairs around the world, they are very much run by families, and they are very open to say, we believe in what we believe, and it influences our business. If you take a closer look into faith itself, it calls you to really understand that unique relationship that individuals have with the divine, with other, with nature. But then faith, when you understand it that way, it links back to that trust and confidence on what is known from that relationship. How you are influenced by that relationship with the divine will translate into your everyday activities because of that experience you have. At the end of the day, religion is a human experience. It creates systems of meaning that allow you to reinforce faith. This is what, a lot of the articles were telling us. This is what we knew. But also, we were very much, it was interesting to find the recent study that suggests that 84% of the population claims a religious affiliation, where religion is either very important, extremely important, or somehow is not neglected. So, gosh, so, well, this is interesting. So what happens here? Is it transmitted or not? So what was the problem of the opportunity we saw in here? Well, first of all, there is a very strong theological turn in entrepreneurship. And you can find this in very strong journals like Journal of Venturing, ETP, and others. They are saying there is something here that we need to explore a little bit further. And so our argument was, well, religious faith might influence individuals, it might influence family firms, and it might very strongly influence the way families do entrepreneurship. Let's take a closer look at that. And so what we did, we actually examined the context of legacy. And if you explore a little bit more the context of legacy, you're going to find that it's a nice way to suggest that it's a co-constructed process. It's not just one individual. It is built up because of that relationship that people have, that community of faith. For us, it was about how do they build it? How do they interpret it? How do they use this to actually shape it? And what we actually found, we went about and asked families, so, okay, tell us about how your business started. And then we began to see that we said, well, it was very important, but also we were guided by our faith. All right. Was it only you? No, everybody shares the same view. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk to everybody who shares the same view. And that's what we did. And we went about, we engaged in a qualitative approach. We studied 7 families in business that have diversified that have business portfolios. So not only one firm, but several firms that they have started over time. What very interestingly is that they engage in family entrepreneurial teams. So different members from different generations joined forces together to create a new firm. And what was fascinating here for us is that we examine a context where people say, well, there is an influence of religion here, but nobody had examined it. Let's see if there is any influence on here, and why does it matter? What we found when we asked all these families is that families create stories. They create stories together as to how their faith influences their creation of new businesses. And we found these stories in different elements. The stories that provide guidance, stories that provide a sense of stability when crisis comes or different issues that they encounter come, and those that provide a sense of protection and hope in the entrepreneurial process. Previous studies have concentrated on the individuals and how important faith was for them to go about and start a new firm. Here, we're extending those great insights and suggested, how about families? And actually what we found is that they do. And the way they do it is that they shape stories. And we thought, come on, is it really the way? Yes, that's what they did. They started to create stories because they experienced these events together. And therefore, they were able to share their interpretation of their faith as they were doing so. It gave them the opportunity to really engage in those shared practices as a family. Why should we go about this particular industry? Why shouldn't we go into a particular industry? How should we shape our business policies? How about this new business model? Does it match what we believe as a family. And so you began to see that process really guided by those stories of doing things together. This is the model we came about with, and we tried to animate it. We basically said at the end of the day, you have families in which faith, if you remove the element of faith in there, you might have something very different. Faith influences families in the ways that they co-constructed stories. They build them together. And therefore, that's why they survive over time, because it's not that my father told me, this is the story. No, we lived it together. And therefore, the motivation for these families was, I'll do the same with my children. So the transmission was done on those stories that were co-created, and they matched those three particular elements. What we tended as well to see is that this is not just a single event. By looking into these stories, what we actually see is the process of cultural making, the way things are done. And it shapes a collective identity influenced by their faith. So it's not just dad or grandfather was religious. No, we all are. And so it connected as well the means that he had in the past for those previous generation, because they were doing it together. It connected how they were doing it now, and at the same time, the kind of actions and approaches that they should have in the future. So it really created that temporal element as well. So we were looking at, again, families that were engaging into these throughout generations and throughout time. Anyway, so opportunities for your research. First and foremost, religion provides you with entire worlds of meaning. This is great because you can examine that. But not forget that sometimes when you have the opportunity to examine religion in family firms, you can team with others, because it is so complex and it's so fascinating that for me it was, gosh, how can I understand that? And this is where you rely on the expertise of others. And again, the interpretation of others, whether you are interpreting it right, and going about and actually asking the people and involved in those institutions, whether it's a priest, a rabbi, it doesn't matter. You begin to really understand a little bit more how this actually works. How this is important to do, for us, it was the aspect of narratives, stories. Why? Because families narrate over time how and why they do things. And we understand the narrative element of how families in business operate. We begin to see the details of those values, beliefs, the faith, and how they are so influential over time in the way they do business that we might not see it until we ask them to tell us their story. And so opportunities for this, I think next year we will have the first special issue published on entrepreneurship and regional development on the topic of religious entrepreneurship. And we've been, really a great team of people, Brad Smith, Saulo Barbosa, Miruna, myself, trying to put together and call all different researchers that are understanding families in business that do business through religion. And these are some of the topics, that they engage with, aspects such as practices, failure, sometimes not only the light side of family of religion, but also the dark side of it as well. What is it that is so unique about religion? And it was a very wide call, and we got a lot of submissions. And so next year we look forward to providing you not only with the editorial of how these different, great studies are saying, but at the same time, they will give you a little bit of a very broad understanding throughout, their study of what context they are concentrating on, different religious perspectives, and why do they matter when we understand family firms as well. This is, again, it was not concentrated only on family firms, but some of them have brought forward the idea that this is something very unique. And if you take a look at the context of this study, we have some family firms here involved. So again, this was a call for entrepreneurship itself, where we find some studies concentrated on family firms. And that's me. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, happy to answer. I know we have a very small period of time, so happy to answer any question that you have. If not, you can follow us through that QR code or send an email to the specific detail we have there. Thank you very much, Tulsi.
Thanks, Allan. Thank you so much. So we'll open it out for questions. But this is so interesting, Allan. I just thought I'll tell you that I'm myself also very interested in this particular research area. And my contribution to this area is essentially coming up with an Indic religiosity scale.
Oh, great. That's great.
And I've
That's
just
good.
put it up on the chat because that was something which we found was missing, because you have the Abrahamic religiosity scales and the Islamic one, but you don't have an Indic one. So me and my
Yes.
co-author, we developed an Indic religiosity scale, which is published in the Journal of Management, Spirituality and Religion.
Great.
And I'm working with some of our Indian scholars to try and look at the relationship of religion in India. Because what would be very interesting, like you said in the Honduras, the point about India is also that most family businesses, as you know, the others who are present here today would kind of agree on, is that family businesses in India are run by communities, which are basically religious communities. I mean, they come from specific religions. And so that's the very, very interesting part about family business in India. So
Great.
the stories that you spoke about, the co-constructed stories, that's something that we hear in the classrooms all the time.
It's great. Absolutely great. And that's, what's fascinating about that is that you have then a context that is so rich to examine as to how, these co-constructed stories emerge, how they are used, how they are upkept, how they are challenged as well.
Yes. Yeah.
By different generations. And because you have that community
Yes.
element, then, it goes
Absolutely.
beyond just one individual. It's far more collective approach. It was fascinating. Gosh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Do you want to stop the screen share?
Sure.
Allan?
Let me just stop this.
And maybe we can take some questions.
Sure.
Most of the work seems to be qualitative. Is that right, Allan?
Yes, I do quantitative work as well, but I'm fascinated by, I'm an engineer that was my degree, but I love stories. So you can tell I love stories. And that's why I think some families can tell you a little bit more on that. We did a paper on how to use the narrative approach. It was published on the Journal of Family Business Strategy. And my colleagues, and we try to really suggest, don't forget the stories. Don't forget these different elements of the narrative that really can tell you more when you ask a family, tell us your story. And in those elements, because sometimes they're emotional, mixed with operations, then a team of people can really unpick, all these different, and that's where you find the beauty of it. And that's how we found some of the elements related to religion that nobody had picked on, because they didn't sometimes wanted to talk about it or felt it was important. But actually, when you asked them to tell me more, it was beautiful because they really expanded on how it influenced them over time, how they experience crisis of faith, how they do this different. And that was fascinating because you could then tell how much it influenced the way they do business. And that was, well, I look forward to reading your paper as well, Tulsi, on that.
Yeah, I've just put it out. And that's fascinating. I'll just make this last point. I'll just tell those of you who are here of this, again, the story which I just heard in the classroom yesterday. This student who is in a business of financing vehicles. Okay, he's financing vehicles, and imagine the reach of religion when he realized that the trucks are being used to carry slaughtered animals. He felt miserable about what he was doing because the religion forbids them from dealing from, this is the Jain religion, which forbids them from doing anything which would hurt animals or human beings. So, yeah. Bhavani has her hands raised. Come on. Yes, please.
So thank you, Dr. Allan, for your presentation and the research, what you have done in this particular area. So I have not done any research in this area, but my colleagues in Wheaton universities have done this research, and then I'm familiar with this. And I'm just I was looking into your research article citation, which you are giving the religious and non-religious comparative analysis which they have done. Like, just a curiosity, I'm asking, like, how do we measure religious and non-religious? Is yeah.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think for us, it was most because it was case study based. Then we were very open to ask, does religion have any influence in your So they say no, or they say yes. So very straightforward sometimes, because when you ask the decision makers, it is easy to go deep into the question and say, well, and sometimes double, triple checking, does religion has any influence on this? No. Oh, yes. And so, or even the ones that they thought that they doubted a bit, say, well, actually, yeah, all right, let's expand on this. And this is where you begin to really separate things. In qualitative work, you have to do that double rigorous checking just to make sure that what they are suggesting, doesn't have been influenced by anything else. But you're right. Sometimes, if we use, for example, some scales, that'll be great. And that can be done, of course, in quantitative studies. In qualitative studies, we still rely on that connection with the people that are provided with the key information to really state, very openly, overtly, are you not influenced by this? But no, I agree with you.
Yeah, is there any scales available to measure that?
Yes, yes.
Quantitative?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what Tulsi has developed. That's really
Yeah.
good, because again, you have it as a particular context, particular, religious perspective, and that really facilitates a lot of things. So that's a great advance. Thank you for that, Tulsi.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Rima, please go ahead with your question. Rima, could you just introduce yourself also? Bhavani, I think you could also introduce yourself.
After you, Bhavani.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm Dr. Bhavani. Presently I'm doing my postdoctorate from Witten Institute of Family Businesses in Germany. And I'm specializing in the role of women in family businesses.
Excellent.
From the cultural context and institutional context, we are studying that, and we are in the process of publication.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Professor Allan. Hi, Professor Tulsi. Thank you for
Hi.
organizing it. My name is Rima. I'm PhD scholar in IIT Madras, and my topic is workplace spirituality in small-scale businesses. So I have done one study. It's still ongoing, the analysis part. It's based on qualitative interviews. And I would like to make a point. You rightly said that religion is a taboo, especially in a country like India, where we are asked to be secular and not talk about religion. So my question is, if you would have used the word spirituality rather than religion, would you see some difference in your analysis or your findings?
Ooh, I think, that's a great question, and thank you for that. Sometimes it goes back to the definitions you're using, the concepts you're using. So what I find that initially when we did the study, they really pushed us to say, can you really define what you're studying? Because there is always a fine line between trying to be religion or spirituality. And so we had to say, no, if we take a look at this, we are looking at these particular elements which relate very strongly to religion, not spirituality. So I think that's a fascinating question, because again, you have to concentrate very much on that conceptual clarity. If it is spirituality, specified really well, what is it that I'm looking for? What are the assumptions of this concept that are so important? And what differentiates them for that line between religion and spirituality? I think you'll do much better if you approach it that way. So if you're doing that, that's the way forward.
That's
In
great
fact,
insight.
if I could just add, religion, religiosity, spirituality are very, very distinct.
Yeah.
But there is also a difference between religiousness and religiosity.
Yes, it's defining, using the definitions very much to your advantage, because sometimes we take it for granted, right? And we sometimes believe that the editors or the reviewers will understand what it means. And some of them say, well, I am not so sure. So the more you help in that paper you're writing about defining really well the concept you're using, and very, very much be clear the assumptions of that behind the concept, the better it will be. So to make it very clear, what am I looking at?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Professor.
Rima. Thank you so much.
No
Yashasvi, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Hello, Alan, sir. I hope you remember we met at IFBRF Cyprus.
Yes.
So, yeah. So I saw your presentations there as well. And today as well, we are talking about religion. So as mentioned by majority of the speakers now, that religion is a kind of taboo in Indian context. And I'm also going towards the qualitative study, and a business, like I reach out to a person and he had a slaughterhouse business, like that was a third generation business, and I took a step back in order to collect data from him, because I was not really sure how to go about to ask questions on these specific terms, where I'm supposed to take insights from the business but again not hurt the religious sentiments of the other person. So as a like budding scholar, how can I cater these problems of different religious beliefs and not to hurt the sentiments of people while asking questions?
Okay. Well, as a scholar, as a researcher, you always have that issue. You come into a context in which you also bring your own values and beliefs as well. So it is a very delicate approach, because when you're going to ask people about their religious views, sometimes it's not as straightforward. But the way we did this is basically, ask them, what influences the way you do things, and what are the key influences of your approach? Is it in your family? Has it be different things? And very interestingly is that at the beginning they don't want to talk about it, right? They prefer to say, well, my values relate to this and this and this. And then when you ask them, well, tell me a little bit more about this. And then slowly you begin to see, for some family members, was about their distance from religion. Whilst for the same other family members in the same families, no, we actually became closer to religion because of a particular crisis or event. And that is where you begin to see the effects that these kind of shared experiences have. And so rather than us asking them, telling them, about the religious, no, it's about asking them what really influences their work. What kind of, were there any conviction as to what they were doing? And when you talk about convictions, then they begin to see, no, you know what, this is what I think, this is what I believe or don't believe. And that's why I do the things I do. And so you begin to see that influence or not in that conversation. So I never bring the topic when I am interviewing. I let them talk. And though when I examine a little bit more the convictions and the beliefs and the values, they tell you whether it's important for them or not. And then if they do, then you can begin to explore it a little bit more. Otherwise, I always back away if they don't talk about it, because it's not what they want to talk about, or not something that they feel is important at all. Hope that answers the question.
If I may just add to what Allan also said. Allan, I think the Astrachan 2020 JBE,
Yeah.
that particular edition, you might want to look at Fatala's paper also in that.
Yes.
It's a brilliant paper. And where when you're talking about the slaughterhouse, and I don't know who's your respondent, but how do they continue to do things which might be forbidden by, say, the religious logic?
Yeah, it might be a paradox as well. Paradox theory. It's a continuous dilemma. But for them, perhaps they have muted down the influence of religion for some reason. And that's interesting even in itself, because you say, some of these families are religious, but they have to mute down the influence. Why? How? And that's fascinating, because we don't know about that. Some families might be wondering the same thing. How do I do this without, affecting the way I see it? I can't remember any study doing something like that. So you might be into something really unique in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you so much, sir.
No worries.
Any other questions?
I think we have, is my pronunciation right? Shika Agarwal?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you got it right.
All right.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
Shika. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm a doctoral student at XLRI Jamshedpur, and my thesis revolves around family firms. The topic that I'm looking at is splitting of family businesses, and splitting of family businesses.
Got it.
And the data that I've so far collected on is from Indian business families. So there, an interesting aspect came out. And it's somehow connected to religion, but I'm not sure if religion is the right word to anchor the question or the point that came to my mind while listening to your presentation. So a lot of these families talked about two Indian epics, Mahabharata and the Ramayana. So when they talked about these epics, they said that, it has happened. So these So they draw from these epics. They draw these values from these epics, where they say that, staying together in a joint family, uh, too many members, the extended family staying together is part of us. That is how we look at, the family setup. And then over a period of time, like over generations, they kind of split. And the reason some of these families gave was, eventually that was bound to happen. You have also seen that in Mahabharata, where these business families, when they could not stay together, they chose to split. And so they anchor their reasoning based on these two epics. So while listening to your presentation, I was thinking, if it's religion, if it's values, the set of values, how do you anchor, or how do you explore these aspects further? Because so far in the thesis, I've just looked at it uh, as an anchor in the societal this or the cultural aspect, but I'm not going deep into.
Mythology. It's basically, Alan, it is our mythology. It is Indian mythology.
Yes, no, I imagine so, and I apologize if I'm ignorant, very limited understanding of it. But what you seem to suggest is that there is perhaps an angle in terms of sense making.
Yes.
Families, because that kind of a conversation, academic conversation, suggests that it was so meaningful. This particular cultural aspect is so meaningful for these families that it helped them to make a decision, and that's interesting. Because a lot of people will say, no, it's, well, we live in a family, but then something you shared that you both, the family members shared, provide some sense into the strategies or the decisions that they had to make. So again, one perspective to examine this, if that's part of your thesis, is about sense making. There's a sense making this conversation. And that might be actually giving you a little bit more of an understanding, such as, look, we haven't looked at mythology here. How about, and again, that's what I mean. You have a very rich context to say, look, this context is rich in mythology. And what these myths suggest is that the behavior, I imagine, and again, I apologize once again, I imagine that the behavior, if you are in that particular situation that you're not sure what to do, these myths give you so much insight and knowledge because of that, shared understanding that is a meaning value system that is really important to give you some understanding what to do. It gives some sense into your decision. So there may be some connection in there if this is the way you want to move forward with your thesis. It can be a chapter in your thesis, right? Yes. But again, it is important, because if you have such a rich context and some rich data like that, gosh, that's another paper. That's a paper in itself.
Sorry.
Yes, so I'm aware of the time, just because I'll have to leave. But if you have any other questions or comments?
Thank you so much. I think this is absolutely lovely, brilliant. Tanvi, do you want to ask everyone to come to switch on their camera so that we can just take one picture?
Yes, ma'am. So I request everyone to switch on their cameras and have the lovely faces on, so we can mark this occasion. So at the count of 1, 2, and 3. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and it was lovely to share this with you. And good luck with anybody doing research in this area. It's a fascinating area. Don't be discouraged. There's so much to be told, to be said, and you have now more tools. Like Tools is new paper on that to really help you on the journey. And I look forward to reading more about your work. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Tulsi.
Thank you. Thanks, all of you. Tanvi?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, one thing you'll have to just tell people that we are coming back again after 2 months in the future. Just add that to your narrative, okay?
That will take it towards the closure, or at the beginning only should I take it?
No, at the closure, you just tell people, and we should try, and as I told you, we should create one calendar so that we can share it with people. Okay? A very good discussion. Extremely good.
Yes, ma'am. This one was very deep. Sure.